Greetings, geeks, and welcome, pop culture enthusiasts, to the first collaboration between Wizards, the podcast guide to comics, and Popgeeks.com, two hubs of genre fun that are ready to explore the world of Zenescope comics in a multi-part series that will be presented through both sites over the next few months. This time around, we have with us a man who began his comics career as an editor at Marvel, but his name is also very well known to fans of 90s comics for the books coming from Top Cow Studios in that era. His works include the very popular Witchblade and The Darkness and Aphrodite 9, right? And so many more. Of course, he's also the writer of Zenescope's Oz, Return of the Wicked Witch, among others. So we're excited to have you with us, David Wohl.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here.
Now,
and actually, what I have to correct, I started as an intern at Marvel.
Okay.
Being an editor, I was an intern.
Worked your way up.
I was a high school intern.
Wow, look at that.
Excellent. Now, here's the thing. We wanted to give you a heads up because we're coming at this from very different perspectives, okay? Because this is the thing. I'm very well versed in 90s comics, hence the subject of our podcast. But I had not read a Zenescope comic prior to preparing for this episode. Meanwhile, we have Michael here.
So I've been collecting Zenescope comics since probably 2010, 2011 or so. I've got long boxes filled. I've got trades. I've got variant covers of things, posters, bottle openers. I've got a
Is that a whole display of Zenescope stuff behind you? In the
that's actually
ultraviolet light or something.
So that's actually my hot toys and collectibles display, where I do have a Van Helsing statue in there that was from the Kickstarter campaign.
Wow.
You know, the funny thing about like me with Zenescope was it was sort of a fluke. I was in the comic book store and I saw a cover of the first issue of Red Agent, and I picked that up and started just reading about it, and then I fell into a rabbit hole of like this universe that Zenescope has forged of the different realms and reimagining of fairy tale characters in a unique and sort of superhero-y sort of way. And I'm a VIP member with Zenescope, so I've got VIP covers. And
are you coming to our Philadelphia event?
I would love to, but I gotta see if I can let my wife get me away from my kids for a couple of days.
Wait, was that Paul Green?
Oh yeah, I've got a ton of his stuff. This is my holy grail right here. This was the one that took me the hardest to find. This was a San Diego Comic-Con of the Hellchild #5. I've even bought, this is how nerdy I am. Like I said, I bought like I think it's either Inferno or Courier bottle openers. I collect bottle openers. And I have a Bell short box that was the print. I've got stickers and all kinds of stuff.
Whoa.
I actually I'm all the way in. Like I know a lot of stuff about I even during COVID when they were doing like the live events, like the VIP events, the events on Facebook, I was tuned in, and I've got like got several of the movie theater cover variants that they've been doing, the movie cover variants, like
I love those.
Oh, I love them. They're beautiful. And
the Top Gun one I think is really good.
The Top Gun one, for somebody that likes, kitschy kind of covers, Adam, Zenescope does some of the best variants, and every book that they release usually has 3 to 4 variants, and then they do some really cool exclusives. They have cereal box variants, they've got movie variants, you name it, and you can even get a poster that shows you which variants and try to like get them and collect them.
Candy box variants.
Yes, the candy box ones. Yeah, it's wild, and they get amazing artists, and that sort of parlays into my first question for you is, what drew you to Zenescope? Like, what was about this company that you're like, wow, I want to be a part of this?
Well, so I've had since they started, I've been like sort of peripherally around them at various times. Like I wrote an issue of the 7 comic when they had that, which was that was pretty close to when they started. And then they at some point asked me to write an issue of Van Helsing. It was like I'll probably get the issue wrong. 25. I don't know. I loved it though. It was really fun.
I probably have it somewhere in the box.
So I really enjoyed, their sensibility. And when an opportunity came up, a couple of years ago, like I've I've been lucky, you know, I've been able to work at different comic book places, you know, during my career. And the the thing about Zenescope, even like because I worked with Valiant, you know, before Zenescope,
Mhm.
and Top Cow before that, and then in between like DC and Marvel, you know, Marvel at the beginning and then DC a few years ago. Like I just like that whole idea of having this universe, this shared universe that all the different characters are in, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously I've creator-owned stuff. I've written my own creator-owned stuff with Aspen for a while. But I just love the idea of like just having this world where all these characters are kind of hanging out, and it's like just intimate. And like, you know, part of the job that I have with Dave is, you know, unlike any other place where I've worked, is you know, we'll basically just look at the what's coming up and just think about like how are things going to cross over. You know, we'll have this like, I've been writing Gretel, so it's like the story of Gretel, I'd like it to cross over into this other story. And you know, when you were at Marvel, I mean, obviously Marvel was great and it was fun, but it wasn't like you could just pick a character and be like, oh, you know, let's have this character jump into the Wolverine, you know, universe
Mhm.
and do that. But here it's like, you know, you could like the next issue of Van Helsing that comes out, or the one that did come out, you know, like she goes to Neverland. You
Yes.
know, like all these different like, so not only is there this world, but then there's the other, you know, Wonderland and Neverland and, you know, and Oz. And it's just it's fun. It's fun to be in this environment and just to be able to have this small group of people like with Dave and with Joe and with Ralph, and to be like, okay, this is what I want to do, you know,
Mhm.
and then they're there to like help push the story in a direction. But otherwise, you know, we're sort of like showrunners for like,
Mhm.
you know, for the different books, you know, and we
So
could decide like, okay, next year it's going to cross over this way. So it's really fun.
that's cool. So Adam, to explain, think of the multiverse for a second, and Zenescope kind of structures it as they call it realms. So they have like the Neverland realm, the Oz realm, the Wonderland realm, and then they have like our realm, and then they sort of explain how various characters have powers. Like Gretel, for example, she's kind of like a witch hunter, if you will. And when she kills a witch, she sort of gets like a tattoo or like a brand on her body and inherits those powers as well. And it's really kind of unique. And like she toes a line of being crazy at times, and it's which is kind of cool. And then like Red Agent, who's Red Riding Hood, she actually is a werewolf too. So she's the big bad wolf and Red Riding Hood in one character, which is kind of cool. And each one of them has this sort of unique sort of twist on the way they reimagine the characters, which I love. And I find it so interesting how they do that, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I'm curious because I did get a chance to read Oz, Return of the Wicked Witch, a recent project
Yeah,
you've been working on. Now, this is what's interesting though, right? Because the Oz universe, it's been adapted so many different ways. Sometimes, for the younger audiences, sometimes for extremely adult audiences.
it's
So,
true.
how for you do you feel that Return of the Wicked Witch, this little mini series here, sets itself apart from previous interpretations of the journeys of Dorothy?
Huh. Well, I feel like, you know, we go on two sides. Like on one hand, um we'll go back, and Dave is like really good about this. I'm not as good as Dave is at this, but Dave will go and read it all, right? Like Dave would say there's 26, you know, L. Frank Baum Oz stories, and Dave will, I mean, he did it with Cthulhu that we just had coming out, and like we'll read them, or he'll read them and tell me about them. And so we try to be, you know, um fair. I don't know, fair is not the right word, you know, like respectful of the original material to a certain extent, right? But then, you know, we want to, because really if you go back and look at the original Oz stuff, it's really weird. Like there's a lot of like really really weird Oz stories.
I
um
I have the original one in hardcover back there, and it's weird, but it's cool. It's like
yeah, oh, no,
it's
yeah, it's definitely
yeah.
cool, and all the characters are cool. A lot of the names are not really usable. Like I have to change a lot of the names because they're just a little too offbeat. Because I guess the like kind of the book on me is I try to keep things, you know, relatable, like as relatable as I can. And and also in air quotes like realistic, you know, like I don't know, or grounded, I guess. Like I like things to be grounded, and one thing about Oz is there's a lot of non-grounded stuff in it. So I'll probably sort of like pull in a little bit, to like the character. Like Mombi's a real Oz character, right?
Yeah,
So
Mombi, I was so excited because I love Return to Oz, that movie, and I was like, they got Mombi in this one.
well, hopefully we I don't know. I mean, she's different, obviously, but
Oh yeah,
there's some similarities, like, but so we try to take the source material and just sort of modernize it, like tell a not necessarily like adult, like
yeah,
I mean, there's nothing like really like crazy in there, right?
yeah.
But just try to tell like a good story, a good relatable story. And I mean, they're gonna veer away from from the regular Oz, but at the same time, like the next one we're working on, right? There's a this is like a, I don't know, I'm probably revealing stuff too early. But there's a character in it that in the original Oz story, there was a character who kind of came to Oz the same time as Dorothy, and ends up in this other place, and we realized with him, like, we could basically just tell this whole story from this other side of Oz. It just seems like it's weird because even though there's 26 Oz books, there's like a lot of like uncharted territory there that we feel like we want to cover, like it's such a fertile place to just come up with new creatures and new people and new storylines. It's fun, and I hope that people who are fans of Oz could read it and enjoy it. I guess if you were a fan of Oz, you liked the Return of Oz movie, hopefully you liked it. But yeah, I mean, that's the goal.
So that actually kind of parlays into my next question. Of all the characters you've had to sort of like reimagine of the fairy tale realm, which was the most challenging for you to kind of retell in a modern age and give new life in a way that connects to audiences now?
I will say that, like, now, like sitting in the sandbox, and beginning to work on the characters, it's kind of weird because this is the character that that I'm thinking about the most is a character that doesn't really exist in in literary life, which is Van Helsing. That we have this like Van Helsing character, who's like I mean, I guess there was a TV show that Zenescope was involved with. I
Yeah.
think the producers on it, and it was loosely based on the Van Helsing book. So like Van Helsing, is the son of Abraham Van Helsing, right?
Yeah.
And in the original Zenescope story, like her origin is tied to Dracula, and like Dracula like gets her dad and stuff. So a lot of it is based on the actual lore of Van Helsing and Dracula. But then Van Helsing herself is a totally newer character, living somehow born in the 1850s or whatever, but now living in the modern day, and working with her, and incorporating some of the old lore from the original Dracula. I feel like it has been the most fun
That's
and
cool.
at the same time,
Yeah.
because like there's been so many Dracula stories, right, and vampire stories, and there's something really fun about them, and like we always want to come back to vampire stories, but kind of creating this new universe for Van Helsing to be part of, and making sure it's interesting, has been the most challenging and fun for me. Was that the question?
No, that's perfect. That's great. So one of the things about Zenescope that I don't know if Adam even knows this or not. So like most of their books don't go like, straight number type of stories, except for Grim Fairy Tales, which kind of stays in its like numbering, like 60, 70, whatever, so on. Currently, I think we're in volume 2, which is like the daughter of the first Snow White, essentially. But most of the books, what they do, which is really cool, they're all kind of mini series, like a 1 through 5, a 1 through 6 type of things. Except they did about I guess a year or so ago, they did a Van Helsing number 50, and it was like a compilation story. It was great, fantastic, and it was a nice thick book with a lot of different stories in it. But most of the things are sort of like individual events tied together over an overarching, story of that particular.
Sort of ties them together. But I think it's really like what we'll do is, because we have like a Robin Hood 100 coming out, in the fall. So usually like those 70 100 is when is when they're like, oh, okay, we're in a milestone, even though each individual issue is just like, has its own name, like Van Helsing Hell to Pay.
Yeah.
When we get to Van Helsing 100, then we'll have the 100 issue. Yeah, and they're usually like bigger stories with like a whole bunch of different elements to them. So yeah, that's fun.
No, it's cool.
That's awesome. I have a question for you. Just it feels like over the last 20 years, like the comic book audience has really expanded. Like publishers have really, really tried to break out of just the young white male demographic. They're appealing to a broader audience. And it feels like a lot of that is just the diversity of character types in the books and starring in books. So do you find with a female focused line like Zenescope, is it bringing in more female readers that just could because they can identify with the characters?
I think it does. I think it's interesting with Zenescope because like a lot of the covers are kind of racy. Might be an interesting word.
Cheesecake covers, yeah.
But so I feel like sometimes like people might get the wrong idea about us, just based on that. But I mean, they're not all like that, so it's more just like because we know that there's part of our audience that's really into that, and but then we definitely do have a base of women who like our books and will read them, which is something that I've experienced, since I worked on Witchblade and going through all the books that I worked on.
Well, that was kind of my follow-up question. Was I was wondering because it's safe to say you've had that experience subverting the expectations when it comes to
we
books
did the
centering
same
around.
thing with those. We had the same problem with those books too.
Yeah. You get an attractive female adventurer, and everybody's like, ooh la la. And then they get a bad girl label when it's the 90s. It's like, oh, she's a bad girl. And then she goes on to become this like exceptionally enduring character. I mean, such a long publication history. So, what in your mind, what then is the secret to writing a female hero who ultimately won't be judged simply by her looks or the way she's drawn in the book?
I think like the word I said earlier, I think it's just grounded, it's like taking it seriously and just not being, I guess this isn't the right word. I don't think this word really exists, but not being cheesecakey in the execution, just like taking all the characters equally seriously, don't fall for stereotypes, and just like the common tropes, just try to avoid them, just I mean, I know with Witchblade, like, I had a co-writer and she had a lot of, did a lot of work on helping me, I guess I always said too that I grew up like with my mom and two sisters. So so I was always trying to pay attention to that when I wrote those characters, like it's easy to fall into the trap of writing, what you think they're supposed to sound like rather than what the people actually sound like. So I work hard on making sure that stays realistic.
So to piggyback on that, like, yes, a lot of the characters may be drawn like risque, if you will, but they don't play up that in the stories at all. It's not
I was
really about
surprised
that.
when I opened up those books. I was like, whoa, this is like nothing like what the cover is presenting.
Yeah, they're heroes. I mean, and honestly, my favorite character is Belle, and Belle is like fully covered up, like with a full uniform kind of a thing. And and I've got a gazillion covers here, tons of variants. This is I love this one, from Underworld.
Oh yeah.
And I have tons of these. So, and I mean, I could go on. I got the Joker variant cover here of this one. I mean, so many. Even got like the Daffy Duck variant over here. There was a whole series on it. It's wild. It's amazing. But what's funny about that, and I said this earlier about the variant covers because they have so many. Do you have any like ones that are just like, I love this one, it's beautiful, it's amazing, showcase stuff, like, wall books, if you will, kind of thing?
I mean, yeah, there's a few that like I'll come across them and I don't really want to separate anyone from any other one because I just wouldn't feel right doing that. But yes, there are definitely ones that I'll look at and be like, wow, that's so cool. A lot of them that I mean, I will. I'll bring up one artist who we work with that I think. I mean, I guess we already talked about Paul Green, who does really good stuff, and Jay Anacleto, who does a lot of the covers for us. And I bring him up too, just because at various times in my career, I think that's how I pronounce his name. Like I've worked with him, like Brian Haberlin started at Top
Mhm.
Cow with us, and Jay was sort of a Brian protege. I don't know what the
Mhm.
term, but like he kind of worked with Brian, and I love his work. And whenever he does covers for us, and then there's just really new guys. Like Dave is really good at like working with new guys. Eric Basildua is another
Mhm.
Top Cow, originally Top Cow guy who is doing a lot of work with them. Like a lot of the guys that have gravitated to Zenescope are guys that I've known and worked with before.
Yeah,
And
you'll see like Keith Garvey covers. You'll
yeah,
see Sun Komanaki.
yeah,
Um,
Sun is amazing,
amazing, does amazing stuff like
and
this.
Carla Cohen and Igor Gomez.
Carla Cohen, the poker card, the covers that she does are just out of this world. Like you can't even imagine how
And
just
I love
Mazzolo.
seeing you so excited.
dude. I'm super nerding out here. I'm like fangirling like that, like
Aw.
Jonah Hill, like face. It's really nerdy. But
Like
yeah,
I
a
have
lot
a
of them too,
question
it's like,
about that though, because like it's like you say, Zenescope kind of has their way they've placed themselves in the marketplace, and this is definitely like, you're gonna get one audience this way, and then when they're reading it might be a different audience that might read.
although I gotta say the other audience does like that too. I think a lot of the women who read it are totally, I mean, judging from the VIP shows that we have and conventions, like a lot of them don't mind that either.
Yeah, but going back to these people that you say you've known for all these years, because really, like when you were at Top Cow, especially, like the industry is cooling off. Everybody's like, it's over, it's over. Then you and Mark Silvestri just come up with this idea, and all of a sudden, it's like reigniting a lot of like it kind of points everything in a new direction from superheroes to like mystical fantasy adventure type stuff. So, what have you perceived then is the biggest difference in the comic book industry from the mid 90s and then now? Like what's changed?
Hmm. You mean like what was popular back then to
I,
what
I mean, like,
popular
I
now?
guess you could look at it for trends, or what is the way that like that the industry has evolved from that moment to where we're at now? Do you feel like there's more freedom to publish things? Is there a greater like swath of like creators, or like I guess I'm just
Yeah,
trying
I
to think,
mean, there's definitely more freedom to publish things. I mean, if you think about like when Image started, it was just Marvel and DC. I mean, I guess Dark Horse was doing stuff. I mean, Image, like it was weird because it was sort of the creator owned thing, but then it was creator owned, like everyone was creating their own universe anyway, like Rob had his universe and Jim had his universe and we had our universe and Todd had his universe. So yeah, it was the opportunity for a much larger group of people to be involved in the creation than there were before, rather than just working like on work for hire. So then over the next 30 years since then, scary to think, think about the whole creator owned landscape has exploded, right? And then there was always a thought that creator owned things could never really be successful, and then like that they proved that. First the original Image guys proved it, but then when you look at something like when The Walking Dead became like the incredible hit that it became,
Mhm.
that was something different, that wasn't like Marvel or DC, that became like one of the hottest superhero related titles ever. um but then at the same time, I think strictly looking at The Walking Dead and other, like there was a whole kind of writer oriented group of books that have come out over the past, like, say 20 years too, that kind of pushed in another direction. I think like DC and Marvel, like say back in the 70s or 60s, 70s, 80s, was very like company centric characters, and we, the editorial world, decides who's going to do what. Obviously a huge amount of creators like grew out of that, but it was really editorially driven stuff, probably like Jim Shooter was sort of like the peak of that at Marvel. But then, even like Marvel up to today is still sort of, editorially driven to a certain extent. And then with us at Image, it became artist driven, right? And then like after that, it kind of became writer driven. And now we're sort of living in that. Like there's still obviously a big artist driven world, but I think it's just expanded. Like there's different ways to go, and people, like any creator now, could just build their own audience and watch it grow, and that's just so different than it was before.
I think social media helps that as well too, because like
Totally.
there's so many artists that use Instagram, or writers that post things that they're doing, or they have Patreons now, or whatever they.
I mean, I think the
Kickstarter thing is big.
Of the Kickstarter world connected to the social media connection is so makes this decade so different. I think, even though it's funny because like the biggest Kickstarters are just from comic publishers for the most part.
Yeah.
Biggest comic book Kickstarters. But then I look at like Michael Sullivan, or Brandon Sanderson, like fantasy writers, who basically have built this whole new audience for themselves through Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different audience because you're not reliant on the retailers anymore. I'm saying for book publishers, not reliant on booksellers anymore to build your audience. And it's like and you're basically like in the old days, people would commit to a book. Like a lot of retailers were like, they have, I mean, I guess they still do, right? They have like the pull box and really like the pull box, the Kickstarter is basically a pull box deal that you're making like directly with the fan.
Yeah.
Because they're ordering their book from you.
Would you say that is it easier or harder to get the word out about a new project? Like back in the day, for example, we're a Wizard magazine podcast. Like you could put it in Wizard. Everybody who's a comic book fan is reading it. They're going to see it and they're going to know whether Wizard is, saying it's good or bad. They're like, oh, this exists.
I got to say, that depends who you are, because, and I'm saying how old you are really, because if you're me, Wizard magazine like gave me a chat, like in the 90s that I have on AOL, like this AOL chat that I hosted every week. And for a little while I was in the top 10 writer list, and even though I competed with my co-writer Christina Ziefert spot, I still am a little upset at Jim McLaughlin for that. But so for me, that world was easier because I can't envision doing a Kickstarter now and trying to figure out, the logistics.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Today, I got to think that for people who are succeeding at it, like again, like Pat Shand, who writes for us and has like really successful Kickstarters with his creator-owned projects, like the ability to cultivate your own audience, to promote yourself to them, get this email list that are people who actually want to see your emails, unlike most publishers who send emails that no one wants to see. And the fact that once people will pick up your Kickstarter, they're very likely to pick up the next one too, that ability to cultivate your audience like that is something very special that I think beats anything that was in the past. But I just don't think that I'm able to do it. I don't think that I have the bandwidth to interact with everyone like that.
Well, between the two of you, from the fan perspective and then from the creative's perspective, what is it that Zenescope has done so well? Why are they connecting? Why do they have such a loyal fan base? What's the secret?
I think maybe Michael could say better than me, but I think it's caring about what the fans want and incorporating that into the stories. It's the fact that I think that we're small and able to just work on all the stories, and there's not like all this external, like it's not like we're going to give a story to somebody who's going to write something totally different, sometimes to our detriment, because I feel like we kind of keep a heavy hand on the stories because we have, like I said at the beginning, we have this idea of where we want them to go. And Dave and I are always like, I don't think anyone else could write this, we're gonna have to do it ourselves because no one else will get it the way we get it. Probably there's a lot of people who will get it, but we do that. And Also, I guess it's interesting. I feel like that the niche that Zenescope chose, right, to pick like grim fairy tales or Oz or Neverland, right, gets people to look, right? Because I know Dave always says like, and I don't know how Michael got into the first place, but if it was like, oh, look at that, there's someone doing like a modern retelling of grim fairy tales,
Mhm.
or like I know like Dave always says like, like people will just glance at something that's Oz related, you know, but will they keep reading it? I think that's the key, is like we know that people will look at it because they'll wonder like what this is about. Like you in Return of the Wicked Witch, right? They'll pick it up, they'll be like, oh, the Wicked Witch, like I wonder what kind of story this is. But then we need to keep them, and I think we're good at that. We're good at telling stories that people want to see.
From the fan perspective, honestly, I was walking through the comic shop. I think I was at Midtown Comics the first time I bought a Zenescope book, and I saw a Red Agent cover that was just so unique, and I just opened it and was like, huh, a reimagining of Little Red Riding Hood, and I was like, okay, I'll buy it. And then as I learned that like all of these stories are 5 issues. It's not like, or 5, 6 issues, let's say, they're not going to be, a year long story arc. It's very rare that they do that. And I like that sort of small dose sort of thing. I like that certain characters like Robin Hood are based in New York, or, somebody's or like Van Helsing's based in London. And then they had these other realms. And I'm just kind of interested in something different. And oftentimes you get with stories from, in particular, the big two, um, the same stories over and over again. Like we've seen so many crises, or we've seen so many, secret whatevers and so on. And Zenescope is able to, as you said, like play in a sandbox. It's a little bit different and sort of mix things up. And I really enjoy that. It's the stories, they take themselves seriously, but they also know how to have fun with it as well, which I really, really enjoy. And in particular, I think they figured out, like in particular with COVID, right? And everybody being remote and doing these sort of like uh fan only events via Facebook or VIP. And the company is in a lot of ways similar to Wizard, where it's a smaller group of people that are reaching out to a much bigger audience. And, they do these like, live events where they're showcasing stuff, and you can, chat into it, and like, or email directly to somebody there, say, hey, can you pull that book for me? Can you get me this? Or like, I'll go to the comic shop and I'll have a receipt of all the books that I bought at the comic shop, email them, they'll give me rewards points based on what I bought in the shop, not even from the website.
Oh,
And it's really, really cool. And I've never had a problem. If there was an issue with something, that reach out to them, showcase this. And they've got, in particular, when it comes to covers that reach anybody. You could have, movie color covers, or, cereal box covers, or candy covers, or what they call like their Z labeled covers, which are sort of like, adult covers, but then they also have different versions of that. So like, this is sort of like a reimagining of, Sue Storm in a way. And they
Like
have
cosplay covers.
cosplay covers, like this is like, like I said, this is my white whale. It was like a reimagining of Batgirl. And there's another version of this. It's a reimagining of Huntress that I think I have somewhere in a box
yeah. Well,
somewhere.
that's what we're living in, this time of multiverses in the general pop culture. The audiences are understanding. And I know you kind of had a question in that vein, Michael. I'm very curious to hear
Okay.
that one.
Since you've worked in various comic publications, while at Zenescope, is there a character that you would love to pull from another imprint or another publication and have them interact with a character in the Zenescope universe?
Probably Harley Quinn.
Ooh, that's a good one. That'd be interesting. I'd love to see like a Harley Quinn, like Robin
Cinderella.
Hood. Oh yeah, yes. Another. It'd be so interesting, like a Vampirella versus like Van Helsing sort of a story. Like that would
Yeah,
be
yeah, that'd be
wild.
cool too.
That'd be wild. Um, but yeah, this is just something I was thinking about. Like, that'd be kind of an interesting thing. I was sitting there like, I'd love to see like Green Arrow meeting Robin Hood and just like the two of them bantering back and forth. They're both, Robin Hood-esque characters.
One of my favorite things I ever did was like when I worked at Top Cow, I was able to do the Marvel crossover because I was friends with Mark Grunwald. And he like let me do it, even though he passed away while we were working on it.
Oh wow.
But that was so much fun. I remember doing a Witchblade Wolverine story with that. That was like one of my favorite things to this day that I've ever worked on.
That must have been so cool.
And getting to work with people that I worked with at Marvel, like Larry Hama wrote one of our stories. And
oh yeah, that's right.
Really fun.
Yeah, we
cool.
covered those on the podcast. That was a very
Oh,
fun.
really?
Yeah, the whole Devil's Reign stuff. That was great. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's underrated.
It
Maybe
is.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I think it is. There was some, especially like there's some stuff with like Ballistic and Ghost Rider that was just hilarious. Like there's some good stuff there. So
Yeah, well, it was kind of weird because like half of them were ours and half of them were Marvels.
Mhm.
And I felt like I don't know, no offense at this point, but I felt like a lot of the Marvel ones, like some of the guys who were working on them weren't taking it as seriously as we were.
Well,
I can understand that.
Yeah.
So as an editor in chief, that kind of bothered me a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure, for sure.
I mean, this has just been so fun, just especially for Michael, just to pick your brain and get your thoughts about the old days, about what's going on now. Just
Yeah,
very
it's been
curious.
fun.
Yeah, where can people find you online? Where can they get connected so they can find out about the latest projects?
That's DG Wohl at Instagram, and I'm on Facebook, and Zenescope, is their Instagram, is promoting a lot of my stuff, and on Facebook.
And you can also go on the Zenescope website, and they have like a catalog of all the past books, and you can look up certain issues of that. They might have back issues of it on the website you could check out and order. They even do a really cool thing every once in a while where they like send you, if you're a subscriber to their email, like I am because I'm a nerd, and they'll give you like free digital copies of certain books. Like there was a certain, character that I had never read before, and I was like, oh, here, you want a digital copy of this? And I downloaded that and ended up buying the whole trade because I like the thing. It's just it's
we're
cool
trying
stuff.
to do more of that too.
Yeah, that stuff's great.
But we're definitely trying to do more on Instagram, our Zenescope Instagram, and I think TikTok, and I'm not even good talking about it.
Well,
okay.
David, what Michael really needs to know is, are there any more bottle openers on the horizon?
Please don't even
probably so.
Oh, please. And if they ever come out with hot toys of Zenescope characters, they'll be like, oh, they're shipping them to Long Island again. Here we go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, this has been fun. Zenescope is everywhere. You can find them. But Michael, so is Wizards, the podcast guide to comics. Where can people find us?
So our Instagram is wizards_comics. Our Twitter is Wizards Comics. Our Facebook is Wizards Comics. And then we have a Wizards YouTube channel where mostly we're talking about back issues of stuff, or unboxings of things, or action figures, and all kinds of other random stuff. We have mini episodes. We've got interviews like this. We've got, the Wizard Files where we've had Wizard guests on in the past. You can go to wizardscomics.com for our website for tons of back issues and episodes. And we've got like, what, 200 something episodes now, 300 or something.
Yeah, over 200. It's pretty wild. We've had
it's
a
insane.
Fun ride the last couple of years. But we also want to let you know that we are going to be back in just a few weeks. We're going to be interviewing Zenescope co-founder Ralph Tedesco. So that is another insider look as to what's going on over there. So stay tuned for that. But hey, until next time, keep your books bagged and boarded.